being married to Henry VIII was less of a fairy tale, and more of a death sentence. And while we all know the fate of the 6 women he married, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, the list of potential victims of this tyrant's love could have been much longer, because Henry considered many other women as possible wives. In today's video, we're talking about those who, through luck, intelligence, or sheer circumstance, managed to escape becoming Henry VIII's wife. Our first heroine, who miraculously managed to avoid falling into Henry VIII's grasp, was, ironically, the niece of Katherine of Aragon, his first wife. We're talking about Elellanena of Austria, the daughter of Joanna the Mad, Katherine's sister. Henry VII, the father of the then still very young Henry, was deeply interested in forming an alliance with the Habsburgs, especially since, after Arthur's death, that entire arrangement had been left hanging in uncertainty, while Katherine of Aragon, who was meant to secure it, remained in England in a rather unclear position. And then, by a twist of fate, in 1506, Eleanor's family crossed paths with Henry VII. Philip and Joanna were shipwrecked in England and became, quite literally, unwilling guests at the English court. Ever the opportunist, Henry VII seized the moment and proposed a double alliance. Prince Henry would marry Eleanor, and Henry's daughter, Mary the Tudor, would marry Charles V. But there were a few complications. Eleanor of Austria was still a child, around 8 years old at the time, 7 years younger than Henry, so the marriage was still years away. And Henry himself, as we know, was a romantic by nature, raised in a household where he had seen a loving marriage, and someone who genuinely believed in the idea of love. It's hard to imagine him truly picturing a future with a child he had never even met, especially when, right beside him, there was the beautiful young widow of his brother Katherine of Aragon, with whom he had clearly fallen in love. So, immediately after his father's death in 1509, the new king, Henry VIII, took matters into his own hands and married Katherine of Aragon just weeks after his coronation. This bold decision brought the negotiations for Eleanor to an abrupt end. The Habsburg princess, who could have become Queen of England, fortunately for herself, never set foot on English soil. And yet, Eleanor would go on to live a remarkable life and would still, in her own way, become connected to Henry's story. She would first become Queen of Portugal, and later, in 1530, she married Henry VIII's greatest rival, Francis I of France. Looking back, I think it's safe to say that Eleanor of Austria likely considered herself very fortunate, especially after seeing the fate that would later befall her aunt. The next woman who was fortunate enough not to become one of Henry VIII's wives was Mary of Guise. By 1537, the 46-year-old king had once again found himself on the marriage market, having become a widower after the death of Jane Seymour. He finally had his long-awaited male heir, but as we all know, it never hurts to have a spare. And Mary of Guise was, quite frankly, one of the most desirable matches in Europe at the time. She was connected to the French royal family, had a strong inheritance, and, not least, stood at an impressive 180 centimetres. Quite remarkable for a woman of that era. Our famously many-married king sent his ambassador to France to inquire about her, and, according to one story, Henry even boasted to the French that a man of his size required a wife of equal stature.
I want to make babies with her. Think of them. Great big monsters. They conquer the world.
But Henry's interest in Mary was not entirely romantic. It was in many ways competitive, because Mary had also caught the attention of James V of Scotland. And competing with the Scottish king was, for Henry, a matter of pride. If Mary chose him, it would be a double victory, a prestigious French bride, and a blow to Scotland. When this rather questionable compliment reached Mary, she delivered one of the most famous lines in Tudor history. With razor-sharp wit, she replied, "I may be a big woman, but I have a very little neck." It was a clear and daring reference to Henry's habit of beheading wives who displeased him. Mary of Guise made it very clear that she had no intention of risking her life for the temperamental English king. Mary chose Scotland, and later, in 1542, she gave birth to a daughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, whom Henry would later attempt to claim as a bride for his son, launching what became known as the Rough Wooing, a series of military campaigns aimed at forcing a marriage through sheer pressure. But that is another story. One thing, however, is clear. Henry's methods of courtship were, at best, highly questionable, and suited only those women who had no real choice in the matter. If there was ever a woman who truly embodied the idea of escaping Henry VIII, it was Christina of Denmark. In 1538, this young noblewoman responded to the king's proposal with the now famous words, "If I had two heads, I would gladly put one at the disposal of the King of England." Once it became clear that Mary of Guise would not marry Henry, Cromwell continued the search for a suitable bride for a king who, by this point, already had a rather troubling reputation across Europe. All three of his previous wives were dead, which was not exactly a reassuring sign. Among the potential candidates, Christina of Denmark stood out in particular. She was the granddaughter of Joanna the Mad and Philip the Handsome. Her mother was their daughter Isabella, and that made Katherine of Aragon her great-aunt. It seems Henry simply couldn't escape the women of that family. He had never met Christina in person, so he sent his court painter, Hans Holbein the Younger, to Brussels to paint her portrait. Holbein was instructed to make it as realistic as possible, since Henry wanted to judge her appearance before making a final decision. And just as it would later happen with Anne of Cleves, he liked what he saw. At this point, one might say Holbein was something like the Tinder, or perhaps even Photoshop of his time. In short, Henry was ready for yet another marriage, but Christina and her entire family had serious doubts. Her uncle was the Holy Roman Emperor, while Henry was a man who had broken with Rome and treated another member of her own family, Katherine of Aragon, in a way that did not exactly inspire confidence. No advantages of the English crown could outweigh that. In the end, the negotiations went nowhere. And while historians still debate whether Christina ever truly said those famous words, another telling remark survives from the time. Thomas Wriothesley, the English diplomat in Brussels, advised Cromwell that Henry should fix his most noble stomach in some such other place. And so, Christina of Denmark managed to avoid this marriage, to keep her head, and to live on to the age of 62, as the wife of Francis, Duke of Lorraine. Henry VIII's fourth marriage, his ill-fated union with Anne of Cleves, is well known. But what is less often mentioned is that Anne had a younger sister, who was also considered as a potential royal bride. In 1539, after the failure of negotiations with Christina of Denmark, Henry's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, turned toward the Protestant states. England had become increasingly isolated from Catholic Europe, and Cromwell was now seeking alliances with the Lutheran princes of Germany. The Duchy of Cleves, located along the Rhine, played an important role among the German states. Its ruler, Duke Wilhelm, had two unmarried sisters, Anne, aged 24, and Amalia, a few years younger, around 22. Henry could marry either of them and secure an important alliance. As was customary, Henry once again sent Hans Holbein to paint portraits of the Cleves sisters so he could choose between them. Holbein painted Anne, and possibly Amalia as well, although that portrait has either been lost or was never confirmed. Anne's portrait, as we know, pleased Henry. She appeared richly dressed, calm, modest, and, on the canvas, quite agreeable. Based on reports and the portrait, Henry agreed to marry her. Meanwhile, Amalia remained in a way the backup option, waiting in the wings. In diplomatic marriages, it was not unusual for multiple sisters from the same family to be considered, in case negotiations failed or the first match proved unsuitable. So while Anne set off for England in the winter of 1539 to become queen, Amalia stayed behind, waiting. And then came the disaster. In January 1540, Henry met Anne of Cleves in person and was instantly repulsed. The poor girl simply did not meet his expectations. Henry is famously recorded as complaining about her appearance and body, insisting that he felt no attraction to her whatsoever. Whatever the exact reason, he wanted to end the marriage almost as soon as it had begun. Logically, this might have been the perfect moment to replace Anne with her younger sister Amalia. She was unmarried, available, and perhaps would have pleased Henry more. But Henry VIII's pride had been wounded. He felt deceived by what he saw as false advertising in Anne's portrait, and now had no desire to trust any woman from the Cleves family. For Amalia, this turn of events meant one thing: she remained safely at home in Cleves. She never married. Perhaps her prospects were affected by the very public collapse of her sister's marriage, or perhaps she simply never found a suitable match afterward. Either way, Amalia spent the rest of her life in the German states, far from the dangerous marital world of Henry VIII. And finally, the last woman who might very well have become Henry VIII's seventh queen, if Katherine Parr had not been quite so intelligent and quick-thinking, and had not managed to save her own head, was Catherine Willoughby. Her name doesn't appear very often in Tudor films, but in reality she was a very important figure of her time. To begin with, she was the wife of Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, Henry VIII's closest friend. Brandon was around 49 years old when he married the 14-year-old Catherine, and this happened just 6 weeks after the death of his previous wife, Mary Tudor. Catherine had, in one way or another, always remained within Henry's field of vision. In fact, as early as 1538, the imperial ambassador Eustace Chapuis reported that Henry frequently visited Lady Suffolk, whatever that might have meant. She later served as a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves, to Catherine Howard, and was a close friend of Katherine Parr. By 1546, Henry's marriage to his sixth wife had begun to show cracks. The king's temper and paranoia were only growing worse with age and declining health. At one point, Katherine Parr's interest in theological debates nearly got her into serious trouble. Henry even signed a warrant for her arrest on charges of heresy, though he never carried it out after Catherine skillfully reconciled with him. During those tense days at court, many wondered who might replace Catherine if she were to fall from favour, and Catherine Willoughby's name was at the very top of the list of potential seventh queens. She had everything Henry valued. She was significantly younger, around 25, while Katherine Parr was in her 30s. She had proven her fertility by giving birth to 2 healthy sons, which was always a major advantage in the king's eyes, and she was of noble birth, with a sharp mind and a charming personality that Henry had long appreciated. In the end, however, Henry's health declined rapidly. He neither arrested nor divorced Katherine Parr and never made a proposal to Catherine Willoughby. Henry VIII died in January 1547, still married to his sixth wife. If Catherine hadn't managed to avoid marriage to one old man, she at least managed to avoid another. And it's chilling to think what might have happened if Katherine Parr had ended up with beheaded in that famous rhyme, and Catherine Willoughby with survived. Each of these women managed to escape becoming Henry VIII's wife. Their stories are all different, but they are united by one thing. They avoided a marriage that could have ended in catastrophe, a marriage that promised the title of Queen of England, but at the same time could have placed their lives in very real danger. Which of these almost wives did you find the most interesting? And which what-if scenario stands out to you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and please support me with a like or the hype feature if you enjoyed the video. It really helps and motivates me to keep creating more content for you. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.